Hello and welcome to the M.B.M podcast, where you'll learn to master the business of yoga. M.B.M is a proud part of the Wander Barn Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Amanda Kingsmith. I'm a 500-hour registered yoga teacher, a yoga business coach, and a total business geek. Here at M.B.M, you'll learn everything you need to know to create a sustainable yoga business by learning from myself and guests from around the world about how they built their yoga businesses, and about how you too can become a successful yoga teacher, studio owner, and much more. All right, let's dive in. Hey friends, I just wanted to pop in and talk a little bit about M.B.M Behind the Scenes. When I entered the yoga world as a teacher, I was surprised by how many yoga teachers were struggling with the business side of yoga. And that's why I created M.B.M. M.B.M helps yoga teachers and studio owners become entrepreneurs. It helps you to go from surviving to thriving with your yoga business. I am on a mission to change the yoga industry, to teach yoga teachers and studio owners about the business of yoga, and to help you feel more confident, successful, and abundant. After releasing hundreds of podcast episodes, I want to create content that dives deeper into helping yoga entrepreneurs thrive and elevate their businesses. This is where M.B.M Behind the Scenes comes in. Each week, you will get bonus content from the weekly guest or myself, diving deeper into how you can take the teachings and apply them to your business. This podcast is designed for yoga teachers and studio owners who are ready to take it to the next level. If you enjoy M.B.M and have been looking for an affordable way to learn more, this is it. For the cost of 2 lattes per month, you will get never-before-heard content that you can't access anywhere else that will give you tangible ways to dive deeper into your yoga business. If this sounds like something you're interested in, let's dive in. Head on over to patreon.com/MBM Yoga and sign up to get behind the scenes now. Once again, that's patreon.com/MBOM Yoga to get all the exclusive behind the scenes content. I'll see you there. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the M.B.M podcast. Today on the podcast, I am very excited to welcome back Maryam Sharifzadeh from Office Yoga. She is the CEO and founder of Office Yoga, and she was on the podcast a couple of years ago talking all about office yoga and corporate yoga. And as you may imagine, many things have shifted since we had that last conversation. So today on the podcast, we are diving into everything that's changed in the yoga industry and specifically in the corporate yoga industry, because really, what's office yoga without an office? And that's what Maryam kept thinking with her own business and worrying for the sake of her business. But as she's been able to pivot and change things around, she's really been able to actually see an increase in demand. So that's pretty cool to hear about. You'll get to hear all about how she did that and all that good stuff. And then we also dive into talking about conscious business. And one of the things that we talk about is how COVID-19 is highlighting the problems we have systematically in the yoga space and in the world, and how as business leaders and as business owners, we have this ability to run conscious businesses and to be conscious business owners. And so Maryam dives into that, as well as talking about all the different changes that we're experiencing or that we have experienced over the last year. So this is a really insightful episode with lots of good stuff that we cover, and I'm really excited to share this interview with all of you listening today. Before we get to the interview, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to the sponsor of this week's episode of the show, OfferingTree. You've heard me talk about OfferingTree so much. I've been working with them for so long now, and I just genuinely love their company and the people behind it and the product and service that they've created. They've really gone above and beyond to create something amazing that works for yoga teachers. So they are truly your one-stop shop for everything that you need for the business of yoga, everything that you need for your digital marketing. I'm going to tell you more about them a little bit later on in the episode, so stay tuned for that. Make sure you have a listen if you've been struggling with the idea of a website or an email list, or you're not sure what scheduling software to use, etc., etc. They've got you covered with all of those things. So in the meantime, let's get to the episode with Maryam. Without further ado, here she is. Welcome to the podcast today, Maryam. I'm really excited to have you here with me today.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you again for hosting me.
Yeah, absolutely. It has been a minute since we connected. The last time we had you on the show was the end of July of 2019, which is really not that long ago, but it feels like it was kind of like a whole other world ago, a whole other time ago. So
That was
I'm
a
curious if,
lifetime ago.
yeah, right. So much has happened. So I'm curious if you could just start by catching myself and listeners up to, what you've been doing over the last year and a half ish.
Over the last year and a half, I mean, pre-pandemic, I feel like that's the timeline now, right? It's pre-pandemic and then post-pandemic. So pre-pandemic, office yoga was at its peak, honestly. We were in about 12 different states and across the country from East Coast to West Coast. And I had the instructor training program all set and we were hosting them live. And it was really starting to kind of, there was a nice system and a nice flow to the way that everything was happening. Because, as an entrepreneur, you're always creating and you're always trying new things and you're adapting to the market. So at that point, I felt like, okay, it's been 9 years. We have a good flow. I have a good way to train instructors, bring them in. And then, come March of 2020, everything just flipped. It was it was so wild. I feel like I lost a business that I built for 9 years in 2 weeks. Just in 2 weeks, everyone just switched out. It was, I definitely had to give myself some time to mourn, the loss of what I had built. But I'm surprised to see how things have changed. So I'm very optimistic, and there actually is quite a demand. I thought I was going to have to put office yoga aside and just start a whole new business or a whole new career. Because what's office yoga without an office? All the offices are closed. But I've been pleasantly surprised and a little overwhelmed by the increase of demand, actually. Um, so that's been, it's something that we'll dig into, I'm sure. But it's been a fun and interesting transition for a creator like myself.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I have another friend who works in corporate wellness in San Francisco, and her story sounds very similar to yours, where she was like, I lost 50% or more of my clients just within a week, basically because offices closed down so fast. And it took a little minute to kind of figure out what this like office yoga, what corporate wellness kind of looks like in a space where there isn't offices. And so I would love to hear kind of what does that look like? Because I'm sure that there's people out there who have been curious about this or who have maybe been teaching themselves that are like, I don't know how the heck to dive back into this.
Yeah. Yeah. I could speak to my experience, and I'm actually so grateful that I had my big anchor client, or one of my big anchor clients, Twitter. We, and they have my story with them is a story in and of itself. But I will say that we finally got an on site program, after 8, 9 months of work together. We started an on site program at the very beginning of February. And this was for 9 different locations across the country. And we established a system for their global program so that we can offer classes and services to the tweeps in other countries. And so that was maybe 2 or 3 weeks old. And then come mid February or maybe end of February, Twitter was at the forefront of everything. They were one of the first companies to shut down. I get a call from the wellness director, and her and I have been through so much already together. And she just called me and she was like, so we're going to shut down the offices because of COVID. And at that time, we didn't really know what COVID was. And I was like, are you kidding me? Just so we'd put so much work getting everything together. I hired new instructors. I had 10 new people on staff for this. But I was very lucky that I had established a system for offering classes online. So when companies started to shut down or they closed their offices, I offered, I said, hey, do you want to work with us online? And it was a simple, it was Zoom or whatever preference they had. And actually, this is something that we should talk about is not every client allows Zoom because of security reasons. So a lot of companies, especially big ones, will have different video conferencing formats and software that they use. But we can go back to that. I had experience just teaching online already, live stream. So I just offered my clients, an option, and we just gave them a time slot and kept that going. And it was supposed to be very temporary, 1 month, 2 months, and then that was just I didn't really have a system. I just made up whatever my client needed at that time, and I accommodated as I could.
I definitely feel you on that with your business. And I'm kind of curious, like, if you can talk about, as you've been able to shift office yoga online, like, what does it look like now in terms of your business and what you're offering and what the students get and that type of thing?
When I shifted, it's morphed a few different times because teaching 30 classes a week is not sustainable. It's morphed a few different ways. So now I have exclusive clients exclusive classes for companies, or they can sort of come into a community class of just office yoga. And a lot of clients have opted for that because they get more classes and more opportunities. And we also have an online program that's just breathwork and meditation. And that's actually open to the public, the daily refresh. And that's Monday through Friday, every day. So I'm just creating programs based on what people have been asking for and needing. So that's the online classes that we offer. We also try to get into the company's wellness channels. We've been doing a lot of like short videos that are little tutorials for employees who may not be able to make class, because people are turning into zombies right now. Like they're just so tired of Zoom. Uh, so, so just trying to find different ways to reach out to them, different ways to reach out to them. So that's part of the business that I currently have going. What I'm excited about more is, so before the pandemic, and I'll be really like real talk here, I loved office yoga. I love what we do. I didn't like the way I was doing it. It was basically set up where I was contracting other instructors, which works. It's a great model. It totally works. But I was caught in the middle. Like I was the middleman between the client and the instructor. And for me personally, that is just not like, I'm not a middleman. I'm a creator. I'll create something and then I'll educate and inspire people to do, or use it however they want. That's my happy place. And so I was caught like managing instructors, and I was caught, feel like being in between these two things. But the train was going so fast that there was really no way for me to pull out of what I had created. So honestly, I even felt when the pandemic hit, I said, this would be a really good reset to maybe change the way that we're doing things, because the service is very much needed and the demand for the service is proving that it's very much needed. But I don't want to be in a position of being the middleman. I want to empower instructors to be able to do what I do and make it their own. I could teach them everything that I've learned in the last 9 years, and they can do what they please with it. Because I feel like every single instructor has an individual, a unique lens that they see things through. So, maybe you have a Ayurvedic background, or maybe you also have Pilates that you want to offer, and you just want to maybe expand your services beyond, the 4 pillars that office yoga has. Go for it. But I want office yoga to be more of an educational platform. So I am putting the instructor training online. It is, a lot of the core is similar to what we taught in person, in the in-person trainings, and it will be for on-site and remote clients. So we'll talk about the different conferencing platforms that people have, or video conferencing platforms. Using Google Meets is way different than using Zoom. Using Cisco WebEx is different, so you're going to have to learn how to use these different platforms. Once you do, you figure out there's similarities, but the lenses could be different. Like Google Meets, you get a much smaller lens. So you either have to adjust your camera or your setup to teach that class. And if you're going back to back, that's something that you have to think about. So there's just some simple, but I think useful things to talk about in this transition online. So I'm excited to empower other instructors to be able to do this. I think that it's much needed.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure what your experience has been like from your clients, but I just know from working with studios, a lot of the students who practice have just been like, this has been a lifeline for us over the last, 6, 7 months, as the whole world has felt like it's in chaos. It's like this one thing continued. And even though it was different, I can do it from my house and I still get my yoga practice. I would imagine that your clients were similar. Tell me if I'm wrong.
They were similar, and they wanted some familiarity. They wanted something that they knew from before, because everything was so different. Everything was changing. And I think that that was really useful for them. I do find that the 60-minute, like the tolerance for yoga class isn't as high. like a yoga studio could easily do a 90-minute class. At least here in San Francisco, classes would be 75, 90 minutes. I just don't find the tolerance for online classes to be that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. We found the same thing for sure.
It's been interesting, Amanda, to see the different requests, I talk to a lot of, it's either like wellness, like head of HR or, sort of people on the higher ups that are wanting to implement their programs for clients or for companies, their employees. And it's been interesting to see the demands. It can be anything from like a 10-minute, can you start our meeting with meaning is what I've been calling it, a 10-minute stretch at the beginning of this meeting. Or just, what else do we have? Ergonomics has been a big one too. We've been doing a lot of like ergonomics for your home office. That's also available online in our courses. But it's been a lot of like short 10 minutes, 20 minutes here and there. That's been a lot of my experience.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really interesting. Yeah. We cut all of our 90-minute classes to an hour 15 and most of our hour 15 classes to an hour because we definitely found the same thing. And as a practitioner, I find the same thing too. I feel like, yeah, I'm pretty zoomed out at the moment. I'm kind of like, oh, I don't want to spend any more time on my computer than I have to because I'm just staring at a screen all day. Right. And we have freedoms to leave and stuff now. And we've been able to socialize for a couple of months here in Canada, which I'm really grateful for. But for a good chunk of that time, it was like you go to the grocery store once a week. You're not really supposed to be seeing people. It was freezing cold out here. So everything was done on the device, and you just kind of crave something that's not on there. But at the same time, it's so nice to have, this sense of normalcy and, be able to have your yoga practice still, even though you can't go to the studio or can't practice in your workplace like normal.
Yeah. Yeah. They're coming for the community and they're coming for the person that's behind the screen. So I have been finding that getting them to attend to come to another meeting, like another Zoom meeting or another Google Meets, is there's a little bit of a barrier there. But once they're in, a lot of the practice is them not looking at the screen. Honestly, I'll do drills, like I'll do exercises where we do the 20-20-20 rule, where every 20 minutes you want to look at something 20 feet away for 20 seconds. So that's one of the simple, practices that I will keep incorporating into our sessions to remind them every 20 minutes. Look at something 20 feet away for 20 seconds, and that will save your eyes. Because I don't know about you, I never wore glasses, and now I have to wear glasses, first thing in the morning because I've just been on the screen so much, and I
Yeah,
feel
yeah,
it,
that's
on the
interesting.
weekends when I'm not teaching, I don't need them. So it's an
Hmm.
interesting experience.
Yeah, yeah, I've definitely felt like my eyes have been a bit more strained as well. And I'm curious also with this. I know that there's like a lot of things that are changing and shifting. And you mentioned the software platforms. I had never really thought about the fact that there might be, companies not using Zoom. So, in terms of being like a corporate wellness teacher, an office yoga teacher, I guess there's like a few more steps than maybe like the average yoga teacher needs to go through. We're learning these extra platforms. What are kind of the other common platforms that companies are using?
Video, in terms of video conferencing or just in general?
Yeah, video conferencing.
Video conferencing, I now have experience in Cisco WebEx, Zoom, obviously, Google Meet, Teams is another one. Jeans, I think Blue Jeans is one. I haven't actually had to use that one, but that's another one that a client suggested. I was able to convince them to use Zoom because I was like, I can't handle another video conferencing platform right now. But those are the four that I have experience with right now. There are a few more out there as well, and I imagine it may keep growing and expanding, but for the most part, if you're proficient on Zoom, Google Meet, Cisco WebEx, I think that you should be okay. Cisco WebEx is probably more for like the old companies that are in finance. Google Meets will be like a lot of the tech, like Twitter is Google Meets. They were big on their security. Um, Small businesses, small medium sized businesses will probably be comfortable using Zoom.
Yeah. Okay. And so
Zoom's just a little bit
when,
more lax. Yeah.
yeah, for sure. And so when you're like kind of negotiating contracts or figuring out classes, will the company normally tell you which software they prefer, or do you recommend one to them?
I will recommend one to them. That is definitely recommend one if you can. Don't ask them what they want to use. Just suggest, like, we do our conferencing on Zoom. If it's a security issue, they will tell you that we can't use Zoom. So then you'll have to use whatever it is that they're using. And oftentimes that's going to be a non-negotiable. So you just have to pivot.
Okay. Gotcha. That
Yeah.
definitely makes sense. And now it's time for a short break from the show to talk about our sponsor, OfferingTree. If you're interested in finding an all-in-one platform for online or in-person teaching, then you should definitely check out OfferingTree. OfferingTree set out to make creating your digital presence fun, easy, and affordable. With one click, you can build a website, run online or in-person live classes, sell pre-recorded classes, manage memberships and packages, and much more. Communicating with your students is seamless and easy with their automated email system and email marketing tools. Already have your own website? No problem, because OfferingTree can embed seamlessly into your existing website. They're always adding new features to their platform to make it even better. They just recently released the online store feature that lets you easily sell digital content like yoga videos, challenges, and courses right from your website. If you're looking for a single platform to take care of all of your online and in-person teaching needs, then visit offeringtree.com/MBM. OfferingTree has been supporting M.B.M for over a year now, and I not only love the product, but I also love the people. OfferingTree is providing special pricing for M.B.M listeners, so be sure to visit offeringtree.com/MBOM. That's offeringtree.com/MBOM to receive the discount. All right, now back to the episode. And then, yeah, so lots of things are shifting right now. And one of the things I know we want to dive into is, the conscious business movement and the fact that this whole pandemic has been, highlighting a lot of problems that we have systemically. And I would love to hear kind of where office yoga fits into this and kind of your thoughts on it.
Yeah. So Office Yoga became a certified B Corp in March. And that process, well, first of all, certified B Corp, you opt into a third party certification to validate your systems and the way that you run your business is socially responsible. So I had to, in order to get my B Corp certification, I remember one of the questions, there's 400 questions, okay? One of the 400 questions was, what kind of energy do we use? Like, what's our green energy service? So I had to look at the energy. I switched to 100% green energy. I had to create a carbon footprint spreadsheet to do that. I had to send in like my car miles, my gas miles. I had to say which airplanes, which flights I took and which airlines I used so that they could track the type of gasoline that the airline uses. I opted out of doing this, but they wanted to get all of the energy uses, like the wattage and the gas from all of the instructors that I had as well. So I had, I think, almost 30 instructors at that point. And they wanted me to reach out to them and get all of their energy use for 2019. And I was like, do I really need the points for that? So I had enough on my own, which we scored high enough in that one question of 400. But that is just one example of like the questions that they're asking you and the things that they're requiring of you. They also look at the banks that you use, like what kind of bank are you with? I'm actually switching out of my bank. I'm going to a small bank in San Francisco and moving away from the big bank that I'm with right now. So there's things like that where you just really start to look at the systems and the things in place. Like that opened my eyes to, I think I'm a conscious practitioner. I think I'm a conscious leader, but actually there's all these things I'm doing. Like, who are you buying your purchases from? Like we talk about Amazon and how much money Bezos has. And we complain about that, how he's not being generous, and giving enough compared to other leaders. But at the same time, you're ordering your chapstick and your conditioner from Amazon. It's like, okay, well, you vote with your dollars. So how are you spending your money? And I think that that's a big highlight. That's something I definitely tap into in training and encourage people to really look at the way that they're spending their money, because you want to encourage small businesses. We are small businesses. Each one of us is a CEO of our own company, of our own business. So we want to support the people that are working just as hard as we are. And it's fun. I have my dish soap is now a B Corp. My toothpaste is now a B Corp. So I think about these people. I know them. They're small businesses, and I think about them every time I brush my teeth or every time I wash the dishes. So it's fun to really think about how you're spending your money.
Yeah, yeah. And so for people who aren't super familiar with a B Corp and what that means, can you talk a little bit about like what that is? And then also I'm curious if there's a place where you can find like a list of B Corps.
Yeah, you can go to oh my gosh, I'm sure if you Googled B Corp, you can find it, but it's B Network maybe, or bcorporation.org. I should know, but the assessment is on a specific site. The B Corp movement it's so once you go through the certification, you are now in network with other B Corps. So you get to work with like-minded people, which is really nice. And in that movement, we're really trying to encourage through messaging and through branding that these are the ways that we support. So for Office Yoga, 5% of our revenue goes to a nonprofit. We all are thinking about who we're hiring and how much we're paying them. So we practice equal pay. We practice diversity and inclusion. These are all things that other businesses are also doing. But the B Corp is like heavy in, deeply rooted in that. So we often highlight and try to work with each other because a lot of us are small businesses. So that is, once you're in it, then you get to work with these people. There's conferences, there's like masterminds and just good women's networks and circles that you could be part of to get ideas. What's really funny, I was talking to one of my instructors yesterday just to check in and see how she was doing. And I was telling her that when the pandemic first hit, which is right when I got certified, I got into the circle of B Corp women CEOs. And we were all struggling, right? Like we all got hit pretty hard during the pandemic. And so what ended up happening was people were doing trade of services. So I'm working with a digital marketing agency and I'm trading them for yoga services. And it feels a lot like Burning Man, where people are trading services for services. And it's an interesting way to go about it, or like discounting things. But it's an interesting approach, and I actually really like it because you get to know the person. It feels like we're all trying to take care of each other, which is different when you're out in like the capitalist world. They're just trying to squash you. They want to get ahead. They're trying to protect everything, and I feel like there's very little sharing and support if you really start to climb the ladder up.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds like it's definitely like a supportive group of small businesses and even some bigger businesses, which is really amazing. And I'm curious, like for you as like running a yoga business, why was like the B Corp or the conscious business movement something that's important to you?
I feel like right now, even in the B Corp community itself, but just in general, there is a big trend towards like conscious business or conscious leadership. But what's really happening is it's conscientious leadership and it's conscientious business, because people will implement something like a recycling program. Like, okay, well, first let's define consciousness and conscientiousness. Conscientiousness is doing the right thing. Consciousness is more being, right? So we're doing and then there's being. So what's happening right now is that there's a lot of conscientious practices of recycling, like I just mentioned, or having a diversity and inclusion program. There's definitely things that people are doing, but the way that they still behave is not reflecting that. If you're a conscious leader, there's no way that the way that you think and the decisions that you make can be unconscious. That you don't really need to have those systems in place. So I feel like with Office Yoga and with the Office Yoga instructors, our role in the world is to help leaders and help people be more conscious, not necessarily conscientious. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
If
yeah,
you're a conscious
absolutely.
leader, like there's no way you would just drink a cup of coffee and then throw your plastic or paper cup on the street. Like you just don't do that, and that's, I think, the difference that we can make in the world. I'm seeing a lot of great systems being implemented, but I still look at these leaders and I'm like, you're so stressed out and you're actually not that nice to your employees. Like, and you're not that nice to yourself. It's an interesting place to be. And I feel like if you could just step back and actually look at yourself and take care of yourself, which is what yoga teaches us, we can make a big shift in the way business is done.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's kind of interesting because one of my like philosophies and what I try to teach through the business of yoga is that we can bring the practices and the principles of yoga into the business of yoga. So we should be operating our businesses based on our values. And as obviously, yoga teachers and yogis have many different values, but I think that as a practitioner, there's some core values that a lot of us are aligned on and operating your business from there. And so I think of it as like heart-centered business. So everything I do needs to kind of pass through not just my head, like, does this make sense financially? Is this a yes for me? Do I want to do this? Does this feel good? But also passing it through like my heart center in the like idea of, is this in flow? Is this in alignment with what I'm doing? And I think that's like a piece that's really important in terms of linking this like spiritual practice with the business side, which is also important in terms of like financials and sustainability and reaching your clients and that type of thing.
Yeah, if you want to talk like real solutions, real things, so office yoga, my principles are based on yama and niyama, right? And so when you look at like satya, for example, truthfulness, are you really being truthful when you are doing your bookkeeping? Like, let's talk about write-offs, okay? Like, when you're your own business, like, was that really a write-off for your business? Like, was that really a meal with, a business meal, or was that just a meal with a friend who also practices yoga? You know, I actually, when the fires hit California, and we're all working from home, I had to go to the hardware store and get an air purifier. And I thought about it so hard. I was like, would this be considered a write-off? Because I need it to work for my home, but like so I struggle with that. Like, is that actually a write-off, or is that personal? Is that business? I don't really know. So these are the things that we're constantly having to question. And if you also look at, right now, it's so crazy when you really look at it, Amanda. CEO to employee, like, salaries is ridiculous. It's 385 to 1. So an average employee, let's just say they're making like $50,000 a year in the US, the CEO is at minimum making $10 million. It is ridiculous how much that they're making. And that is just like minimum. Most of them are making a few $100 million. And so you look at that and you think, like, to me, that's a parigraha. Like, you are just, that's simple greed. And do you need that much money? Like, what are you doing with all of that? And so I think about this in the systems, and I'm learning a lot still as I keep going down this BCorp movement and working with these conscious companies. It's like there's a lot of injustices in the way that we operate our world. And I think right now in politics, we are really seeing that the majority doesn't actually matter. A lot of the power is in a small group. And I feel like we feed that power through the businesses by, voting with our dollars. Like, if you are still buying from businesses that are not conscious, you are paying those leaders. You are helping them get richer and richer every time you make that purchase.
Yeah, and I think it's really about like determining what your values are. I feel like personally, there's no like who am I to say what's right or what's wrong in terms of how people want to use their money. But I do think that it's really important to look at your spending habits and make sure that that is aligned with the things that you believe and the things that you kind of want to put out there as a business owner. And this goes for all yoga teachers, all studio owners. We are all entrepreneurs, we are all business owners. And I think that it is really important to remember that like each day you have a vote, really, and you vote with the money that you choose to spend on products. And for me, I think about like, yeah, of course I like cheap stuff. Like, everyone likes paying less for things. Like, I think that's just the reality, right? We see that as yoga teachers and we see it in our own actions. But for me, it's important to look at like, okay, if I'm going to buy a product, let's say it's like a piece of clothing, I could get it really cheap, maybe at like Walmart or Target, but where was it made? What was it made from? And what are the conditions of like the person who made it versus looking at companies that have like really clear sustainability guidelines and like they're really transparent with what they do. And so I think that that's a really important aspect of business. And, we're talking about yoga business, like this is important for all of us to think about because we all make these decisions daily in terms of who we align ourselves with, who we interact with, and how we spend our money.
Yeah. Yeah. If you look at basic supply and demand, you know, if there is no demand for these cheap products from companies that are not taking care of their employees or the planet, then that's going to change, right? And that's going to encourage. And if there's a huge demand for companies who are conscious and small businesses, then it's going to shift the market rate. So you're talking about paying a little bit more for something that's maybe made nicer or a B Corp or just a conscious business. That price point will go down with the demand, right? So I just feel like there needs to be a shift, and we all need to have that understanding of, yeah, things are cheap because they can be, because that's what people are continue to spend their dollars on because they're just not thinking about it. I think that's just a simple principle. If we can, that helped me. When I was like buying toilet paper, I was like, man, this, this one's like $4 more than that one. It's like almost twice as much, and or whatever it is. But it's like, I have to put my money where my mouth is. And I talk about the way that we're spending because that is a material, practical way that we can change things. This is a very material, practical way we can change things. Of course, through our practice and through offering yoga and offering meditation, that's really the essence of what we do. But when we talk about, like, I'm a Capricorn, so everything's gonna be what's the material, like what's the practical way to make this change? We could talk about it in theory, and we do, but what are we actually doing
Mm-hmm.
off the mat and outside of the office?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And kind of bringing this back to the idea of like office yoga or corporate yoga, I feel like it kind of comes back even into these decisions. And maybe you can tell me more about this, like in terms of the companies that you would work with and that you would offer, your sessions to. Like, how do you kind of make sure that alignment that we just talked about with daily purchases kind of aligns like in your business?
Yeah, that's a great question. Ideally, my goal is to be working with only conscious businesses and people that I love what they're doing. I also feel in the back of my mind, I feel like businesses that are not either have conscious practices or conscientious practices, I feel like they need our services. So I definitely don't want to turn my back to them, or have our instructors, definitely want to work with these people so that you can educate them and teach them through the practice and through what we do. Hey, maybe you want to consider getting recyclable, or compostable plates instead of these plastic plates, like something super simple, that they can do. I I would like to work with B Corp companies and conscious companies, mostly because I feel better afterwards. Like I enjoy my time with them, and I feel good when I'm done with the session, and I feel good when we get off these calls. Like the digital marketing company is Calibri. I love working with them. I'm like elevated every time we get off of a call. They're just great people, and they care about you as a person. And it's mutual, and it's so nice to have that.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. I completely agree with that. And I love how you said too that part of that is, and part of the conscious business movement is bringing education to people. So I really like that, like aligning with businesses that feel good to you, that you like working with, that are good people, but then also using what you know and your practices to educate people towards that. Because I think that that's a big piece is sometimes people just don't know what they don't know. And education is huge. Like it's a really key part of making shifts in the world.
Yeah, I think that's our role. That's our role as office yoga instructors and or any corporate yoga that you're teaching. Our role is to educate them, to teach them about themselves, but also it's simple to, sometimes you have to go from the outside in. It's like, oh, it's, like the recycling or, having compostable plates. If you could just change a small system like that, maybe that'll wake them up to think differently. But generally, I think that it's more powerful when you wake up inside, because then everything changes. But
yeah, absolutely. I think
different approaches.
Things are always more powerful. I think when people kind of like learn for themselves and then make that decision for themselves as opposed to being forced. But I think education is a key piece of that. So I love that. This conversation has been amazing. It's been super inspiring to hear that things are going well with Office Yoga. And I'm curious, is there anything else you want to share with listeners before we wrap up today?
If you are really inspired by making this change in the corporate world, there is a lot of movement happening here, and there's a lot of room for people to step up. So I honestly encourage you, if you are at all inspired by, the way businesses run, because there's a lot of power in that, a lot of power in business, there's a lot of power in media, there's a lot of power in politics. So, there's a few different routes you can go, but I think if you are really inspired by this, that listen to that, because we need people, anyone who is willing to listen and step up. We need you to help, change the way that we do business in the US. We need to change the way that we do business in the world, to take care of people and the planet, not just profits. I think that that's really important. So, let me know. I'm easy to find. I would love to connect with anyone who is interested. And I think that's all I really want to say to you.
Amazing. And so if people do want to connect with you or look at your programs or anything like that, where can they go to find you?
OfficeYoga.com is the easiest place. That has all of our online courses. It hosts the instructor training program. Our Instagram handle is OfficeYoga_Oyo. Oyo is just Office Yoga abbreviated. And that has a lot of video tutorials on desk stretches that people could do. So you could pick up on those. And those, I would say those are the two main sites that you could probably go to find information and contact me.
Amazing. Thank you so much for this conversation and for your time today, Maryam. It's been really great reconnecting with you.
Yeah, nice to reconnect with you too, Amanda. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. I hope that you enjoyed that episode of the podcast with Maryam. Make sure you go check what she's up to and learn more about her online offerings. And in this episode of the podcast, Maryam and I talked a little bit about taking corporate or office yoga online. And we dove a little bit deeper into this in M.B.M Behind the Scenes. We talked about how to actually do this. So how do you actually get started with taking your corporate wellness business online? How do you find clients? How do you start working with them? What do you offer them? How do you negotiate contracts? So basically, how do you run an online corporate business without the actual office? And this was a really insightful episode. So if you'd like to get access to that, you can head on over to patreon.com/MBM Yoga. I would love to see you over there behind the scenes. Once again, a big thank you to this week's sponsor of the show, OfferingTree. Make sure you head on over to OfferingTree.com/MBM Yoga to go learn more about them and to get a discount off your membership if you'd like to sign up. As always, thank you so much for listening to the show. It's always such a pleasure to put these episodes together, to do these interviews, and I'm so grateful to you for listening to the episode. All right, that's all from me for now. I will see you next week. Thank you so much for tuning in for this episode of the podcast. To find links, notes, resources, and everything mentioned in today and all episodes of the show, you can head on over to mbomyoga.com. You can find the podcast and myself on Facebook and social media at Mastering the Business of Yoga. And I would love for you to join the private Facebook community, Yoga Business Badasses. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please make sure you reach out to me at info@mbomyoga.com. And last of all, if you enjoyed this episode of the show, please make sure you hit subscribe and leave a review for the podcast. It would mean the world. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next week. Namaste.